So Tim Lowe, founder and joint director of the Lowe Group. We're thrilled to have you on Memory Lane today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So obviously property guardianship business that finds solutions for vacant properties and also at the same time find solutions for people that are wanting to live somewhere affordably and most importantly in a nice, lovely environment where they can thrive. We know the places that you live are quite intrinsic with the business that you've built, so we're going to talk about that later. But first of all, tell us a bit about the Lowe Group.
I run the Lowe Group with my wife. We have been running for the last 9 years. Primarily, we're focused around property guardianship, which is providing housing solutions in vacant buildings. So supporting young professionals, key workers, creatives with affordable rental solutions close to where they work in locations which, very much would struggle to afford otherwise. While at the same time for our clients, so property developers, landlords, institutions, providing them with a cost neutral service so they're not paying for security, empty business rate mitigation solutions, as well as generating income where we can on buildings. So that's been our core business. Recently we've launched another product which is focused much more working with local charities. So we've got some really good partnerships with artists, mainly artist organisations, where we are using commercial buildings, high rates bills, big open plan spaces, 2-3 years before the client gets on site, and we can place them in there and provide a really well managed solution which ticks all the boxes and delivers social impact to that local community. So
for that charity side of it, so that's kind of studio space or exhibition space?
Yeah, it kind of, I think, like we look at every type of building out there and we try first and foremost and do something which will benefit the local community. And so from our point of view, it's like, does this building work? Yes, in terms of the artist side of things. It can be a mixture between studios, but also when there's like large warehouse or big open floor plans, the more exhibition model works quite nicely there as well. So it's ensuring that we've got a solution which matches what they require.
Okay.
Super cool. So what kind of buildings then? You mentioned the open plans. What different ones?
Yeah.
We've pretty much done every building imaginable since we started. Do that classic thing of saying yes to everything. I think whenever you start a business. So we've done nightclubs, pubs, warehouses, banks. We took over the NatWest portfolio when they closed up their banks down, which was pretty cool. But over the years, we've kind of worked out that certain buildings suit the property guardianship route really well, but also other routes suit the charitable occupation route as well. So ensuring that we're delivering the savings our clients would otherwise have to pay themselves, creating a really well managed solution for the building. But I think ultimately what we're really interested in is actually using that building before development starts to give back to the local community, to support the client through their planning journey and demonstrate that they're engaged with the community before they've started in there.
It's a huge benefit, isn't it?
So are these all around the country or is it mainly London?
Yeah, so we're predominantly London focused, but we've got or have done buildings in Brighton, Bournemouth, Oxford, Cambridge, Bristol, all these locations where we know there is demand for affordable rental space, be it on a housing side, be it on the studio space. We have looked at buildings like further up north, and I think there's some amazing spaces up there, but the rents aren't at the same level. So for us, it becomes much more difficult to make it financially viable. Our service is effectively cost neutral, it's free. We invest in those buildings, so we have to recoup that initial investment out of it. So it's just ensuring that it works against what our client requires.
Okay, so what other kind of interesting buildings? Have you had like churches that you've managed or anything like that?
No, we have done, the full range. I get asked this question quite a lot, actually. I mean, hospitals, schools, nurseries, you name it. We've definitely tried something in it. Certain buildings work really well for what we do. So on the guardianship side, anything which has already lended itself to housing, so ex-care, a lot of the medical based stuff, because the compliance and health and safety is there. Every building we take on, we have to, if it's got more than depending on what the local authorities' licensing rules is, we have to take HMO licenses out in the buildings. If you've gone through that process of getting a building licensed, it's not cheap, and the councils, rightly so, are getting pretty hot in terms of like what needs to be put in there and what doesn't. So for our perspective, it's all about ensuring that we've got the right solution for that particular building.
Amazing. Have you ever taken on a building and thought, oh gosh, how are we going to make this work?
Yeah. I think what's really interesting is the bulk of our costs goes into the compliance. So fire, electric, gas, boilers, a lot of the stuff you can't actually see when you go in there. And I think, again, when we first started, we'd say yes to everything. And now we've become way more clinical around what's the roof like? Has there been any long-term maintenance issues? You got to remember, a lot of the time these buildings are being redeveloped, as they're no longer fit for purpose in their current state. And the owners have typically stopped putting money into them because they know what's going to happen next. We have provide all our services in-house. We've got an in-house maintenance team. So it's meant that we've got the right expertise to ensure that we know what we can do to ensure that a building is safe, is compliant, and ultimately provides decent quality accommodation to those people using it or living in it. So from our perspective, over the years we've got quite good at working what works and what doesn't work.
So presumably there's quite. I
was just going to say, I was down in Kingston earlier. You asked me what I was up to, and looking at a very big office building down there, which had been squatted, asbestos survey, and everything had been ripped out of it. And so for that, we it gets to the point of being like actually going down the more caretaking security solution, although there's a cost attached to it, is the right solution.
Okay. Yeah. So what I was thinking, these are quite big buildings. So how many people do you have living sometimes together?
So the biggest building we're currently managing at the moment has got about 90, which sounds quite a lot.
It does.
So it's some student accommodation, former student accommodation in Notting Hill, so a very desirable area. However, we've learned over the years how to manage people within that. And I think when we first started, I started with a police station in Chelsea. It was just me. I basically did everything from letting, property management, maintenance, etc. And I think probably made that sort of fatal mistake of trying to be everyone's friend. And I think it's quite an easy thing to do as a business, and you want to please everyone. And then we've got pretty stringent rules in place. And then being, just trying to be more human with people with those sort of things. And I think what we've found is you've just got to set your values out, and if people breach those values, they get their notice served.
Of course.
And we always use this mantra that we're a platform, not a life raft. So if you come and live in one of our buildings, brilliant. Use it as an opportunity, use it as a platform. But in 18 months, 2 years' time, we would love it if you've gone into the private rented sector, if you've gone and saved up and bought a house. We had a guy who I was speaking to who lived in our very first building, lived with us, lived there for 3 years, saved up, bought himself a house down in South London, and is a graphic designer. And actually, we had some graphic design work we were looking for. So I reached out to him. He actually reached out to me, and he's got married to one of the girls he met in the building.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Cool, right?
Oh, that's a dream
so
PR
nice.
story, isn't it?
Yeah. We've got so that has been a massive tick.
And presumably people get to live in locations where they could never possibly afford to live.
And I think that, when I speak to some of my friends have lived within buildings, and I've always so we've had some really nice. Sadly, we're just about to give back 5 Georgian houses in private Mecklenburg Square, which is just off King's Cross, and access to a tennis court, and fraction of a price of what they pay otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes this is the other issue, is every building we have goes back. And it's really important to us that everybody understands that this is temporary. This is not a long-term solution, and we cannot have people who start getting attached to the buildings, because they are there to serve a purpose, both for the building owner, but also using that as the opportunity to kind of spring on from it.
So are we talking I imagine lots of creative people that live?
Yeah, it's interesting. It just kind of depending on what the location is. We've got quite a lot of buildings over in East London, so that's much more, as you can imagine, focused towards creators, probably slightly younger demographic as well. When we do the more central London stuff, we do genuinely get a real spectrum of different working professionals. I think what surprises a lot of people is that it is like super professional, like people coming to these spaces. I think when I first started out, being a property guardian was seen as slightly like left field housing solution. But I think there's so many people, depending on what your solution is. Talking to a guy the other day actually, who's from Newcastle, job got relocated down to London, trainee barrister, and just got no network down here. So this is perfect for him because he lives with a building with 20 other people. He builds his tribe up there and builds community within it. And I think those kind of themes are really nice add-ons to why this type of buildings work. And I think when you live with a large, potentially like I say, like 90 people, a large number of people, number one, you're going to find someone in there you like. So you're going to find your tribe in there as well. But also you're going to learn to effectively cooperate with lots of different people, all different stories and things like that. And I think that's really good for people.
Yeah, what a bonding experience to live in a old police station or whatever it is with a group of people that you've never met before. It's like going to university and just meeting those people and finding them and creating those lovely memories that you just never forget.
Yeah, exactly what you were saying. Like this is temporary, so it's enjoy every moment, kind of treasure it. I think, that's really, really.
So you mentioned before kind of working at night, Frank.
Yeah.
And I know the first place you're going to bring, a memorable place that you've lived in, is when you were working at night, Frank, and you were renting with a group of your co-workers and you couldn't actually all quite afford it. And that's what led you to actually what we've been talking about. But tell us about that home.
So I, 25, 26, like a lot of young graduates in London, living with mates from uni in a pretty substandard house in Brixton, paying too much money and getting paid very little from, I mean, that's unfair on night, Frank. Being paid a graduate salary, right? Yeah. And just seeing all my money each month going out to rent. And one of my good mates, called Henry, actually set up he's got quite a successful clothing business now. He was looking to save money while he was starting his business, and so he was a property guardian in an old office building in East London. And I was going to move out of my place, paying 850 quid a month, go live there for like 300, 400 pounds a month. And I'd just taken a job at Night Frank, and I went out for drinks with my team and talked to my old boss, a guy called James Mannix, who heads up the res dev team there now. And I was telling him about my housing situation. He was just asking me where I was living. I was saying, well, I'm living here, I'm moving here. And he said, that's kind of really interesting. Like, how many other places in London do you reckon you can live for less than £500 a month? And I was like pretty new and like pretty fresh to the whole thing, and like not married, no mortgage, no kids, just a girlfriend, right? And I said, 3 or 4, and then we got a lady called Emily Wright, who's she was a features editor at the Estates Gazette. I think she's now gone and done other things. She came for a meeting. We started discussing these options. So I was basically told by Night Frank that they'll pay my rent for 4 months while I did the story, which felt like an absolute result.
Winner.
And so the first place I started off, which is what I'd like to bring to this podcast, is it was an old Quick Fit garage. It was an office above a Quick Fit garage in Gospel Oak.
Sounds great.
So yeah, and again, like it's a property guardian scheme run by a competitor of ours, and sort of turned up there not knowing a huge amount what I signed myself up to, and it was a fascinating experience from a community perspective, from a location point of view. So location was incredible. It's in the summer next to Hampstead Heath. Spent a lot of time, in the Heath, using the swim. They've got amazing ponds to go swimming from.
Yeah.
The actual community living in this building was kind of like, pretty like interesting selection of people who all were looking to slightly beat the system a bit in terms of finding cheaper places. But I did find a real disconnect in terms of the building was incredibly badly managed. The boiler wasn't on the summer. It just felt really neglected from the operator who was managing it. And as a result, the people living there, they didn't care. So it basically meant that there was like a lot of parties, just a lot of neglect for the building. but I had a really great experience, and it really shaped me in terms of that this was a model which, if it was done properly and actually was well managed on the building side, you could actually serve two different, be it the owner of the building, but also the people living there as well. And so that was it. Yeah, but it was
what was it like? What was the furniture inside?
It was pretty basic, and the thing is, because and this is something we've definitely learned, is like, because the Guardian company operating it hadn't invested in the building, so there's like one shower between 20 people. Just a poorly run setup. And so as a result, like, people be smoking inside, smoking weed all day, every day, that kind of vibe. And that's the kind of thing where, like, it was probably like there was neglect on both sides in terms of how that was run. But yeah, had some really fascinating. There's some fascinating people, which I can very happily tell you a very good story about if you want to
Come
hear
on then.
one.
Yes, please. That's what
This was in the day when Twitter was quite big.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you're like Twitter following, if anyone's interested in like Twitter following, but there was a guy there called Twiggy Garcia, right? And you should Google Twiggy Garcia. And he was like kind of, super nice guy. Wasn't doing a huge amount of work, should I say. And but he had like 20,000 followers on
What was
Twitter.
his profession then?
Like DJ, activist, that kind of vibe.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like that kind of different things. Worked in the hospitality, and but he had a big following on Twitter. And I was like, "But Twiggy, how did you like? What you must be quite like? You must be quite a good like artist or anything like that." And he was like, "No, he citizen arrested Tony Blair. So he was working at the Tramshed restaurant, right? In Tramshed's here's a famous. It was a famous restaurant. I don't know if it's still going in East London. Damien Hirst. He did all the artwork in there, and he was waitering there, working there. And there is a fund set up that if you make an arrest for Tony Blair, they will pay you money from it. So if you citizen arrest Tony Blair, and he saw on the booking part that it was you and Blair's birthday party, and Twiggy was dedicated to their private room, right? And this amazing story. He was Tony Blair comes in, all the family's in there. Twiggy sees this as his opportunity to like really make a name for himself. Once in a lifetime opportunity, and fair play, right? He, it's Ewan's private birthday, and Twiggy comes in. He gets all nervous, reads out because there's a memorandum you read when you go to citizen arrest someone, and he like took the drinks and gave everyone a drink down on Tony Blair's table and puts his hand on Tony Blair and says, Tony Blair, I'm citizen arrest you for war crimes against the people of Iraq, Afghanistan. Will you? I'm going to take you down to Bethnal Green police station, right? Now, what's really interesting about this is Tony's been a citizen arrested 5 times already, so he's pretty well versed in it. And I said, what was his reaction? To be fair, apparently he said like Tony Blair was like, right, just grilled him and started asking him about all these different, like, rather than just be like, get out, this is my son's private birthday. He started like going back to him and asking him, put Twiggy on the front foot and asking him about all these different situations in there. And anyway, Twiggy then gets sort of like, pulled out, fired. And but if you Google him, he's given his opinion piece to the Guardian, and there's like all these different things around it. So hence why he got a big following, and he got paid the money as well.
How does that get paid? Is it like a fund?
It's somebody, some like high net worth created a fund who's really got an issue with Tony Blair, and they were just. I think you can donate to the fund.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So going back to the experience.
So they're the kind of people that you were living with.
Yeah.
And again, I think like from where we're now as a business with like property guardianship, I think it was when I was first started doing it, it was quite a left field housing solution. None of my friends knew about it. Whereas now I think for a lot of young people moving to London and they're looking for affordable housing, which everybody is, there's a lot more in the press around it. Who's the lady who did very famous actress, Phoebe Waller, what's her name?
Phoebe Waller.
Fleabag.
Yes. What's her name?
Yes.
Phoebe
Waller. Phoebe Wallace.
Bridge.
For the Bridge, yeah. Obviously pretty A-list.
Yeah,
Her
absolutely.
first ever, I think you have to double check this, but she did a Channel 4 drama called Crashing, which was all about property guardianship in about 2012 in a vacant hospital. Okay. So that was her first initial thing. So it's gone from being this quite like on the edges to actually now being like 50% of our licensees are key workers. You know, we've got a high number on that side of things, and we do a lot of outreach programs with different employer opportunities. So if we go to a location where we don't have such a strong following, like Winchester, for example, we've done a lot of work with their prison and hospitals down there for their staff. So it's no longer being this kind of like quirk. It has become much more mainstream on that side. Yeah,
and you mentioned a trainee barrister earlier, so.
We do get all sorts.
And that's kind of how the housing market's changed, hasn't it? Because people that you used to be able to afford to live where they want to live, it's just not an option for people anymore. Yeah. So when you were doing that feature for Estates Gazette, where else did you live when you were doing that experiment?
So I started at Quick Fit. So started there. I then moved onto a houseboat, which was
where was that?
Yeah, that was in Victoria Park. Which was again interesting experience. The houseboat, the boating community is they're quite closed. They see this as a real like lifestyle choice, and people like myself who are doing it's a bit of a hack in the rental. They don't like that. They're like, we've been boaters. Why sort of get away from our space? And to be honest, you can pick up a houseboat for 20, 30 grand, and as long as you're moving they have these roaming moorings, where as long as you're moving them every 2 weeks, it's a pretty, like, if you can get a bit of capital together and you want somewhere to live, it's a pretty affordable way of doing it. Plus, you get to see London from a completely different perspective. It's quite funny, actually, when I was looking, the hardest thing with this experiment was actually finding the places. And I went on this, like, London Boaters Forum, which is I don't know if it's still going on Facebook, it's like the main forum to find, things. And I put this piece out there, and I just got trolled. People were so rude back and being like, seeing this as being like, don't bring this kind of, you're middle class, I want to find somewhere, you're just going to clog up our waterway. So I got really loads of abuse from it. One guy I met did very sweetly let me come and rent with him, and it was quite amusing because the piece got picked up from the Estates Gazette, then into the Evening Standard. So it started getting publicised in the property thing, and this is when people used to read the Evening Standard, right? And then as soon as that piece went out in the Evening Standard, I went back to the London Boaters Forum on Facebook, and then someone had posted it, like literally just abusing for it. So we did that. I lived in a housing cooperative, which is really interesting, in Southwark, which was really cool, which was this cooperative with a nurse and her 2 kids. A modular house in Wimbledon, which is really interesting. One of the early stage collectives, so they're sort of the original co-living operators before they had their issues. So I lived in one of their buildings. And then the last one, because I was really struggling, it got to sort of, 3 months in, and I was like, I need one more place of it. And I went to a festival where a guy from my school was selling muesli, selling like organic muesli out the back of a horse box, which he's kind of like semi-converted. And so he very kindly rented.
You lived in the horse box.
It's quite a cool converted horse box, but I took it for 3 weeks. And interestingly, again, the difficult thing about horse box is that way to go park it. And so I started off in Clapton when it was a bit more like a client of ours had a development site, and it's a bit more sort of rough around the edges. And, I remember spending my birthday there with my girlfriend, Poppy's now my wife, and also very much involved, co-founder within the business. And, it was a bit of a low patch in terms of, I don't think this is how I want to be living.
You weren't wooing Poppy with that one.
No. So one of our clients from one of the clients at Knight Frank owned a car park next door to our head office in Baker Street, and so very kindly was like you can park your horse box there and use the gym, the shower, and everything like that. And it was quite awkward.
That's cheating.
It's cheating. But I'd be getting changed, going to work each morning, some of the sort of senior partners who kind of didn't really get the fact that ultimately housing in my parents' generation was just it was just a given that you could buy a house, or the housing market's changed so drastically. And they see this graduate, but I always crack gags, be like, oh, clearly need to up your salary or stuff like that. When I was coming out this horse box going to work each day.
That's brilliant.
But it gave me a really interesting insight into housing, into the fact that I think You know, people are way more willing to sacrifice all the bells and whistles which you see for a good deal and a good price. And I think also people want community and they want to be around people, and I think that's one of our main drivers for us.
I'm just picturing you coming out of a horse box in a suit every morning, because I'm guessing if you were
Adjusting
working at
the
Knight
tie.
Frank, you were probably quite smart. You had to be.
And then the irony that you're about to take people all around these lovely houses throughout the day, and then you come home to your horse box.
In a car park.
And I always used to find it like quite painful that like here was, and I think a lot of people do, right? It grates with people of being like, we need to be thinking about housing for people who are actually giving back, be it through that young professional, key worker, creative model, which kind of keeps London going. And you're in that squeezed middle of being like, you're not on social housing, so that's that section out, but then actually getting up on the private renter sector is just incredibly expensive. And the problems at the moment is like, that was 10 years ago I did that, and now it's
Even worse. Yeah.
It's worse.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the first property that you brought with you
came with a
today.
few other random places too, which is most
I'm enjoying
entertaining.
this, this is great. So what's the other one that you brought with you today?
So the other one is a very special place in my heart. It's sadly no longer there, but it's it was a guest house called Bodhi Villa in was a very small town in Cambodia called Kampot, which was right down off the coast. Anyone's been there?
How is Cambodia?
I haven't, no.
Classic thing of being, I think everyone when they go travelling, I was there in 2000 and I basically, mate from school's cousin ran an NGO out there. And I was quite keen when I went travelling to go get involved in some community-based work when I was out there. So I basically did 3 months living in this town before sort of travelling around, going on from there. And I turned up there on my own, it's a small town, and I was in a guest house, but I wasn't meeting anyone. And I was having breakfast one morning, I was volunteering at a school and an orphanage, and I was a bit lonely, and I was having breakfast one morning, this guy sort of came and had breakfast with me, and I started chatting to him, and he was telling me about this place called Bodhi Villa, which is on the other side of a river up in the jungle, really beautiful area. And he was like, yeah, loads of sort of place where it's before people on the internet, so you were using the internet once a month, but you weren't booking anything. Your Lonely Planet was just sort of like guidebook of getting around there. So I sort of turned up there, and it was run by this Australian couple called Joss and Hugh. And weirdly, after we've been talking about this, I've been now going through this stage trying to track them down where they are.
Oh yeah,
it's been difficult. So anyway, they came over from Australia, and Hugh was this pretty incredible guy. I mean, I was 19 at the time. I'd say he was like early, mid-30s, and just had an amazing imagination and had basically restored this incredible old Cambodian villa right on the river, and then built some floating bungalows, which were bedrooms. And he'd also just kind of like really sort of just had an imagination to make it fun. So he'd built a long sort of gladiator style post going all the way out, and that was on sort of Friday nights. You'd have it's sort of the old school gladiator fighting with those paddles on there.
Oh yeah, of course, and you go for it.
He had a jet, a water ski and wakeboard, that was kind of thing. So there's lots of like cool things around there as well.
Incredible.
And you turn up there, and basically the best thing about traveling for me is it taught me how to budget. And like, if you start off somewhere, you want to keep your budgets at the absolute minimum. And I turned up there, and I was like, right, when you're young, you're like, what's the cheapest room you got here? And they had rooms out in the forest, which were $50 a night, which was basically just a hut, but with no doors, no windows, and just a mosquito net going down there. And that's like when you're like, you know, in the evenings, I'll be working the daytime, get back straight away, start, you know, drinking, having fun, listening to music, going out on the boat, that kind of side of things, and then like sleeping in a $50 a night room. And what was really cool about it is they had different price ranges. So the most expensive, the floating bungalows were like $8 a night, and that was like considered that was like
top.
Really
top
special.
Tier, yeah.
And funnily enough, when I went back 2 years later, I ended up doing dissertation for university because I was like, I just want to go back to this place. So I did a dissertation around really randomly, but Muslim fishing villages and the gender divide between the male and the female roles within these communities.
So I was going to say, did you regret going back there?
Yes.
But actually,
yeah, no, I do.
but this has kind of helped shaped some of the thinking in your business anyway?
I think it's a really good one in terms of like if you do, and it's the same with like if you got your childhood home and like I ran past my childhood home the other day, like, and it's
never the same.
I just don't think you do. I think the past is.
Yeah,
the past is
I don't
done.
even like going on holiday to the same place twice because once you've been, you can't ever recreate it. But it sounds like, you know, when you were there, you kind of were a bit lonely, you said, and then you found this place, and then it all changed, and that's about the community we were talking about earlier and how important
100%.
that is.
And like I think I came from quite a sheltered upbringing and probably wasn't that used to hanging out with. I think traveling on your own full stop is a great thing for any young person.
It's going to open your eyes, isn't it?
And you learn to speak to people. You learn to make conversation. If you go somewhere on your own with no one else around you, you will make friends.
I mean, that was brave
You
at
will make
19,
friends,
really,
yeah.
to go by yourself. Because often people do it, but they go with somebody else.
Yeah.
To go by yourself
Yeah.
to Cambodia.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But and then from that, I then end up again like picking up. You know, met a whole group of people from being there, and then we travelled different bits from it as well. So it's like you have these. I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said for getting out your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Massively. You need to do that every day. What's that quote? Will you do something every day that takes you out of your comfort zone?
Yeah.
Don't know who quoted it, but anyway, very similar.
It's quite, but I don't know if that's realistic with, true, right?
Yeah.
True. Comfort kills ambition. And I think there's a really like true part about like, be it from a work perspective, be it from a travel perspective, right?
Yeah, life
that
experience.
actually if you get too comfortable somewhere, your ambition stops. Actually creating environments where you're not stuck in that kind of rut, right?
Yeah, which works for the people who live in your buildings that you manage and look after. Like they don't stay there.
They don't.
And then move on. So
I think the tough thing for lots of people at the moment is that I think when you are struggling so much with housing, it makes society's going to struggle. And you know, if we're not feeling it at the moment, there is only so much which people can carry on taking before they start saying enough's enough and things have to start changing. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting times we've got coming up.
Okay, so I think this kind of leads us on to questions that we ask every guest, which is, what does home mean to you?
So I think from my perspective, number one is probably music. I always got music in the background. I started collecting records a while back, and so for me that's always been something which has always been part of that space. So that's one thing. I think like part of any home which I've had best memories from is also being part of like the garden, and even that doesn't need to be like a big garden. I've got a pretty small garden in Brixton. I'm very keen on that space as well. So my wife looks after all the interiors, and I'm not allowed to even comment on what goes on. So, and she likes to change. I don't know if you guys do this, but she likes to change things around. She admits that it's a mental. There's a mental issue where she feels it has to keep on changing. So I come home.
Faffing. Yeah, I love it.
Do you change your sitting room and your dining room, and does your husband come home from work and it's like, okay,
what's going on here? Yeah,
you
I do that.
Yeah.
It all stems from me as a child. I just rearranged my bedroom, and then I'd be like, Mum and Dad, come look at my new bedroom. I just loved moving things around. I still do it.
And how does your husband feel about it?
He's like, oh no. So then I have to rope him in to pick up furniture and move it around. So he's always like, why?
Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
So she looks after the interiors.
Yeah.
So the only thing I'm actually allowed any control over is.
Are you quite a keen gardener then?
I got into
Have you taught? Is it self-taught?
Yeah. And the nice thing about it is you can always learn.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information out there as well. It's easy to get stuff, and I really enjoy going to garden centres and talking to people about like it's like quite basic, but like it's like growing tomatoes, which is super accessible.
Yeah.
And start growing them from seed, and you just start like over time getting better on that sort of thing. So I think for me, garden and being
Well, that sounds quite therapeutic as well.
Yeah, I'd say it's quite therapeutic as well. And then probably the last thing is like joy, right? Is like I got a young family, so it's always a nice thing. If you've got young kids, you open the door when you get home, and your kids. And great wife, Poppy, who's she's pretty instrumental to the success of like what the business has been. Very much. If it wasn't for her, it would be nowhere where it is. But it's just I always have that initial feeling of getting home and having that space around. So
Do Joy.
Even if she's moved it around a little bit.
We are going through this at the very moment. We've been talking
Oh,
about
it is currently happening.
We've got 2 sofas, and apparently I'm not allowed 2 sofas anymore, and we've got to go back to 1 sofa.
Is it going to go on
Makes
Facebook
perfect sense
Marketplace
to
or
me,
something?
yeah.
Or how does that happen?
It gets sent home to her, like it gets put into storage,
okay.
and then it's like if we ever,
It might be back one day.
It hopefully will be
Basically,
back.
it might
Hopefully
return.
will be. But all ends up in the office. That's the other thing. A lot of our furniture ends up coming into the office at some point, and then something else will get changed. But yeah,
Amazing.
Options.
I think that, those 3 things you said we haven't had before, so
Yeah.
really, really interesting.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thanks so much.
Thank you.